Yo, what is going on, everybody? Welcome on in to the Space Cowboy Show. I'm your host, Ricardo. Been a very busy week for me, so I'm trying to get this show in today. That way, we can talk about this upcoming game against the Commanders tomorrow at 4 o'clock Eastern Time. Before we get fully into today's show, if you guys could do me a favor, please hit the like button. Free and easy to do so. On top of that, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out when I go live or a new video comes out. Next, if you're on the Twitter/X side of things, you can hit the like, share it, follow, or you can go on the link and you can go to the YouTube channel so you can get the content over here. So a lot has happened over the past couple of days on the Cowboys front. And I think the first order of business is to talk about the Trevon Diggs situation, because things have really changed on how we're looking at Trevon Diggs. And is it possible that he could be traded on November 4th or before November 4th in the trade deadline? So there was a report that came out yesterday that Trevon Diggs had an incident or accident, and some people put air quotes on accident. We don't know the full details, but he suffered a concussion at home, and so he's not going to play tomorrow. And what made things even weirder is that Jerry really didn't have any comments. Steven didn't have any comments regarding the Trevon Diggs concussion. And this led to this avalanche of speculation that maybe Diggs is gone. Now, the question then becomes, okay, if the Cowboys move off of Trevon Diggs, is it the right move? Does it make sense? What's the draft capital you're going to get back? Well, the thing is that given with where he's at in his career, you're probably not going to get anything crazy for him. So I think for the Cowboys, they're just trying to get off of the books for him. And I even said this before the season began, was that when you look at how they went about paying DaRon Bland, I don't think they're going to be paying two defensive backs that kind of money. So I always thought they were going to look to move off of Trevon Diggs. And we also saw how Diggs and Matt Eberflus were getting into it. And because of the fact that Jerry kind of stepped in to add Matt Eberflus as the defensive coordinator, I think that also puts a little bit more fuel on the fire that maybe, just maybe, that the rift between, you look at what he said about Matt Eberflus and how they're playing defense and the calls there, and then you look at what's actually happening on the field, and Diggs is looking up and down when it comes to his play. He hasn't had an interception yet this year. All things like that. I think the Cowboys are looking to fully revamp the defense, and that includes getting rid of Trevon Diggs. Now, I predicted that he would be off the team at the end of 2025. They would cut him, move off of the contract, and just say is what it is. But the fact that this is all happening in real time is very intriguing. Now, we'll see how things go from here. I did try to see if there was any further information regarding that story. Nothing that I have heard of. All I know is he's not playing tomorrow. And so I think that as Cowboys fans, you want to keep an eye on that. Now, speaking of the trade deadline and rumors and things of that caliber, there is a rumor circulating that the Dallas Cowboys want to acquire defensive players to help with the defense. Now, there are a couple of names that are being thrown out during the trade deadline, and two notable names that I have had conversations with behind the scenes while I was busy this particular week and trying to get an idea of, like, okay, what players would the Cowboys be interested in? It appears that it's going to be more of an edge player, and we're talking about two names. Those names are Trey Hendrickson of the Cincinnati Bengals and Jermaine Johnson, the defensive end from the 2022 draft class that, and we've talked about him numerous times in mock drafts, and if the Cowboys should go after him, things of that accord from the Jets. Now, he does have the connection with Applewhite, our defensive line coach, and I think that when you really look at, as I'm pulling up the stats for both of these players, but more importantly, what would make the most sense for the Cowboys, not necessarily what would they do correctly. Um, the Jermaine Johnson move would seem like the panic trade of 2025. And so, to put things into perspective, Jermaine Johnson had a really good rookie season, or excuse me, he had a really good 2023, a sophomore season where he had 7.5 sacks, he had an interception, he actually had a touchdown return. And then his rookie year, he had 2.5 sacks, but then he ruptured his Achilles tendon in 2024. He's got a sack this year, but he just hasn't looked as good. It's like he's regressed. And the one sack that he's had this year came against the Broncos this past week. So when you say that he's a 26-year-old guy, 6'5", 254 pounds, you then look at his contract, and this is one of the key things as to when we talk about the Dallas Cowboys acquiring talent, they always look for cheap talent. Now, the Jets did pick up his 5th-year option, so if you do trade for him, he'll be under contract through 2026. And he has a current cap hit of $4 million, then a cap hit of $13 million in 2026. Now, if it were me, I'm not making that trade. Absolutely not. I don't believe that you should go after a guy of that caliber, mainly because of the fact of what else you got. Now, here's the thing. The problem is then, okay, you look at the long-term implications of the defensive end room. Dante Fowler came back on a 1-year contract. Sam Williams will most likely be gone after this year. And you kind of look at where everything's kind of falling into place. And now the question is like, okay, well, what would you give up for a Jermaine Johnson type of player? And to me, a day 3 pick would be fine. I think that he would be worthy of a pick of that caliber, but I'm not going to be giving up premium top draft capital. Absolutely not. I would literally lose my mind. Now, you might say, well, we traded a 4th for Jonathan Mingo last year. In Space, you said that you don't care about how you use your day 3 draft capital. No, I agree, but I'm more so talk about like 5th through 7th round picks. Now, if it were me, if the Dallas Cowboys wanted to throw a flyer out on Jermaine Johnson, I'm more than happy to give up between a 5th and 7th round pick. Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think the edge room is where the Cowboys need help. I think they need more help in the linebacker room. But from what's being said by Jerry Jones, they feel comfortable with that room because of DeMarvion Overshown coming back. But even with DeMarvion Overshown coming back, and let's just say he doesn't get hurt and he plays up to the potential we know he can play, you still need more guys in that room. And I think that with Jack Sanborn, with him missing time, I think a lot of us thought like, okay, you know what, finally we'll get some better guys out there. But it really looked even worse with him not being there. Now, I'm not trying to say that Jack Sanborn is a fantastic player, but clearly the Dallas Cowboys need more help in the linebacker room. But also, what worries me is that if the Cowboys were to make a trade for an edge, they won't look to add a guy in the draft. So if you're looking at a guy like Ruben Bain from Miami, you're not going to see that happen because typically the Cowboys, like we saw last year when they traded for Jonathan Mingo, they didn't go after a receiver because they thought they were fine. Now, granted, they did go after George Pickens, which I think this is where, going back to the Trevon Diggs conversation, I firmly believe if the Dallas Cowboys move off of the Trevon Diggs contract, they will look to load up and pay a guy like George Pickens, who I think that if the Cowboys are going to be really good at something, historically over the past decade plus, they've been really good on the offensive side of the ball, which is fine with me. Just strengthen your strength. That's what I've always said. But the other name was Trey Hendrickson. Now, Trey Hendrickson did get a contract extension, I believe, he got a pay increase, from the Cincinnati Bengals. And the thing is he would be an unrestricted free agent in 2026. Now, that would be a move if you're trying to win now. He's 30 years old. You look at so far the stat sheet of what Trey Hendrickson's done this year. He's only had 4 sacks. He hasn't been that game wrecker that you would want on your team as he has been throughout his entire career. But the one thing that I've always said, right, is that when it comes to a player like that, or when you're acquiring a player, I'm not looking to get a rental. And I think that's something that as fans, if you're looking at, okay, how are the Cowboys going to maneuver during the trade deadline? They're going to look for a guy that has years of control, cheap control on his contract. And on top of that, the ability to be flexible. And if they want to give an extension, they can. And I think if it were kind of doing off of that, now there was a rumor that they could be looking at getting a running back, but I don't see that. But I have a sneaky suspicion that the Cowboys are going to make a trade for Jermaine Johnson. Again, I'm not saying that I have any sources indicating that. This is just strictly a hunch that I have, because if the Cowboys continue this up and down season they're having, I do think that that's going to end up being a move they make because they feel like, oh, we need to add into the room. And the other thing too is that if you do add Jermaine Johnson, you add another guy into the room, which gives you stability at the position. And I think that Jermaine Johnson's talented, but he really has regressed since his sophomore season. And, again, coming back from an Achilles injury is hard. And maybe if you look at where they're at, I think that him being reunited with his coach could also reinvigorate his career. But to me, I'm not making that trade unless it's for like 5th through 7th round draft capital. Anything higher is a wholly overpay, and I would be pissed. So there's that. What's going on, Retro Scotty? I thought it would be a linebacker, someone like Demario Davis. He's 36, but he seems like an okay veteran stopgap player, or maybe Devin Bush. Now, the thing is, and I would agree with you there, the problem is that I think when we look at how the Cowboys make trades, when they make trades for veteran players, it's usually guys that they can get super, super cheap and look to re-sign, or they go after a young guy that has some years of control. That's been really the two main factors. Like you look at a guy like a Jonathan Hankins caliber player, they'll go after those kinds of players. And then you look at, I don't know, a guy like Jonathan Mingo, then Amari Cooper, right? Like, and you can even throw in a Brandon Cooks, right? So it's really those types of guys that they'll go after. But the other thing too is, and then this is the last thing I'll talk about before we move on to the actual game versus the Commanders. The thing is, and why I'm a bit, not really thinking they're going to make a move, especially at the edge position, is because of the fact that when we look at how the Joneses operate, they don't want to make a trade or make a maneuver for a player at that position when they had an ego trip when it came to a player. Like, for example, Amari Cooper, right? Remember when we traded Amari Cooper and we didn't really do anything to add into the room, especially when we were struggling? They didn't go after Brandon Cooks that year because, number one, the Texans were asking for a ton of money, or more specifically, asking for the Cowboys to take a bulk of the contract, but also they wanted a 3rd round pick, and the Cowboys said no. The other thing too is that when you really think about it, they just don't want to look like they made a mistake. And this is going to be the same thing with Micah Parsons. We might go through this the whole year, and then they might go make a maneuver to go get a guy in the edge room. So I don't really know, but I would just say that at the end of the day, do not be shocked if they don't make a move either. And I'm not trying to cover my bases because I did say I think that they will make a panic trade. I really do think they will. So there's that. And then I don't know if you remember we traded the 7th. Yeah, exactly. For Michael Bennett. Yeah, so they make those types of trades. But now I want to actually talk about the upcoming game versus the Washington Commanders. And so let's go ahead and let's talk about where we're at, the injury report for both teams, and so far. So obviously we talked about how Trevon Diggs will be out. So will Terry McLaurin, one of their top receivers. So very good practice week for the Cowboys as we're starting to see some guys try to work their way back from injury. James Houston, full practice, he was still on the field, but my point being is he's a go. Kalen Carson looks to be back. Donovan Wilson was on the injury report for limited practice. He should be fine. Kevontae Turpin, I believe, should be coming back along with CeeDee Lamb. That's what the reports are saying. Jack Sanborn should be back. Tyler Smith, he was limited in practice, but he should be fine. Marshawn Nealon, limited in practice. He should be fine. You got a guy, Trevor Keegan, didn't practice. He's probably not going to play. Cornelius, the offensive tackle, let's see. And then Tyler Booker was the other big name, was limited practice. So Cowboys are getting close to getting their guys back that aren't on injured reserve. And I think that that's key for the Cowboys, because if we really want to make a playoff push, yes, playoffs, I know we're still trying to win a game, but the fact is that you're going to need these guys healthy. You went, and I did say before we went into this 4-game set in October that the Cowboys were going to go 2-2 with or without these players. And so far they're 1-1. They just swapped the games in which I thought they were going to win and lose. As for the Commanders, Dorrance Armstrong did not practice. Zach Ertz did practice. Let's see. Any notable names? Deebo Samuel did not practice. Jaden Daniels, he practiced, and Jonathan Jones practiced. So I would fully expect that the Cowboys were going to be dealing with a Commanders team that has a mobile quarterback, that's a full go. And I don't think this is going to be easy for the Cowboys whatsoever. I think that the Commanders slipped up versus the Bears. And if you guys actually watch that game, it was clear as day that the Commanders should have won that game. They fumbled their opportunity, and the Bears came back and won that game. So don't think that this is going to be easy. I don't think any Cowboys fan is thinking that. I do look at the over and under. That's what I really wanted to look at. So Dallas is a 1.5-point underdog at home. The over or under is 54.5, and the money line is Dallas plus 105. So I don't see Dallas winning this game, unfortunately. And it's not that I'm trying to be a Debbie Downer or try to imply that we're terrible. Well, we are terrible. But the thing is, guys, is that offensively, I have no issues with the Cowboys. I think that they will be fine. However, if they slip up and your defense can't stop a nosebleed, that's the thing. But I was thinking this the other day, was that the Cowboys have done this where they lose a game you would expect them to win, which was that Carolina Panthers game. And then they go on and beat the Commanders. And I think that this is a huge game because whoever wins this game actually moves into second place. And I think that if you are the Cowboys, you missed a huge opportunity to make up some ground on the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC East. But the other key thing is winning this game helps you position yourself further for a possible postseason run. And yes, I understand that people will be like, playoffs, we haven't just won. Like, I get that, the whole meme there. But it's one game at a time, and a lot can happen. Like, we talk about what happened in the game versus the Panthers and how our defense let it happen. And again, I understand our defense is historically horrible, but, getting walked off on a field goal, that happens to other teams too. It just happened to Washington last week. So again, we aren't immune to the things that happen across the league. It is football. It's the NFL. Anything can happen on any given Sunday, Monday, or Thursday, or Saturday if you play on that. So if the Cowboys go out and beat the Commanders, get back to 500, that's great. The problem? Well, you're going to need to go on the road to Denver, which historically you've not won in Denver since the 90s. I think the late 90s you haven't won in Denver. So you really are looking at a situation where if you manage, and I said this, if you go 2-2 in the stretch, that's just what I'm expecting of you. So it's just a real shame because if we could just have this defense fortified, I think that we're not going to waste a prime year of Dak Prescott's career. That's just what's sad about this, man, is that Dak is playing out of his mind, and the fact that we're a below 500 team. But again, that is indicative of the fact of what happens. Historically speaking, if you look at the passing yards leaders, they tend to be on teams that are 500 or below 500 because they're having to overcompensate for a team that's losing or their defense isn't that good. And we've seen that. And Dak Prescott, I think he's on pace to throw for 4,500 yards, 5,000 yards. I could be wrong, but he's like on a ridiculous pace. But he's been cooking. He's had 10 touchdowns, no interceptions over the last 3 games, just playing outstanding football. And if CeeDee Lamb is back and he's full go and all that other stuff, oh, this is going to be amazing. I think we last won in Denver back in 1992. I believe that is correct. So I know it was like the 90s. We haven't won in Denver. And the last time we beat Denver, I think, was in the late 90s. Like we haven't beaten Denver at all in a long, long time. So we're not going to get to that game yet. But of course, we have the Commanders on deck. Go out tomorrow. Just try to win that game. That's all I can say. But the one thing I'm going to say is this, is that if they have another defensive performance like we saw throughout this whole year, minus that Jets game, Matt Eberflus cannot make it to the end of the season. There's no way. Absolutely not. There's no way. Then again, it is a Jerry Ego hire, so we'll see. I mean, for God's sake, Mike Nolan made it through a whole year and goes, look, firing coaches mid-year. It's just so embarrassing, man. I've never seen a defense that putrid. We last won against Denver in home game night. Yeah, that's what I thought. Thank you so much, Retro Scotty. So 1995 is the last time we beat the Broncos in a regular season game at home or at all. That is that is insane, man. But yeah, so in terms of a score prediction, I'm going to say that the Commanders win 35-31. I think that the Cowboys give up a bunch of points, a bunch of yards, and Dak Prescott's having to overcompensate for it. But the other thing, and I wanted to talk about this in today's show before we start doing closing thoughts and if anybody has any thoughts or opinions. So we're nearing the halfway point of this first year under Brian Schottenheimer. There have been things that we've liked, things obviously we've hated, but I'm just going to talk about him specifically, not talking about the defense. I understand how we feel about Matt Eberflus and how that defense is being run and that type of stuff. I'm just talking about Brian Schottenheimer, the play caller, and Brian Schottenheimer, the head coach, and how he's facilitating things. I think a lot of Cowboys fans have to understand that when it comes to head coach speak, he's not going to say anything defamatory towards his coordinators. He's not going to say anything like that's just the politics of the game. Okay. Now, one of the things that I wanted to talk about more specifically was how he's managed games and my gripes with moments where he just goes into a shell, very much similar to how we were under Mike McCarthy. Now, again, the key thing is that the play calling and the scheming of the run game, protections, and the ability to use play action a lot more often, that is improved. I have no issues with that whatsoever. I think that Shoddy has done a great job with getting Clayton Adams in here to do the things that he's doing. I think that that's fantastic. Now, as for where things are at right now, there have been several times where we are aggressive when we do go for it on fourth down, which is fantastic. But there are other moments where they just like a great example of this is in that game against the Panthers where we called like 3 straight screen plays. I don't know what you're doing. I don't know if it's just like, hey, we're going to call these screen plays because like you have a dude that is on pace to have 200 yards receiving in a game, and that's what you do. But I think the other thing too is, and this is what's going to be what other teams notice, is that if you shut down Dallas's run game, it's pretty easy to beat them. And I know that sounds so simplistic, but I think that with what we saw against the Panthers, that could be film for you. Like, hey, if you stop that run game, which they pretty much did, you're basically asking Dak Prescott to play a perfect game. And unfortunately, he did it in that game. And so you lost. But again, we're talking about a first-time head coach in a year that I think that they weren't going to really do anything. So I'm not trying to act like on a high horse or trying to act for the earth and the moon and the sun for anything. I'm just simply asking to see progression. Now, I hope this week we don't see, like, that's the thing. Okay, you had this happen in this game. Not every coach is perfect. Not every game is perfect. But if you could move forward and make those adjustments, we'll be just fine. So there's that. Shoddy should at least apologize for playing like a scared bitch on the last drive. And I agree. I don't know if he made comments about that, but again, those are things you're going to have to learn. If we don't learn from those mistakes, that's when we start calling into question, because people are like, oh, it's the next Jason Garrett. I don't believe that. I don't think that Shoddy is the next Jason Garrett in the sense of him having vanilla play. Like, people need to understand that with Jason Garrett, the way the offense is being run now is a hell of a lot better than what it was under Jason Garrett. The only thing that you can really get Jason Garrett a sense of like pride for was basically being consistent in what he did, which I'm not saying was great, but that's it. Like, you knew what the Cowboys wanted to do offensively. But again, I really think that at the end of the day, this Cowboys team needs to go out on Sunday. Now, even if they lose because their defense is absolute trash, offensively, we need to see the Cowboys able to run the ball, and not only run the ball more effectively. I think what's scary is that Jadon Blue has not looked the greatest. Now, again, most of the plays that I've seen, and I went back and watched, it's just the breakdown of the protection when it comes to running the ball. So I can't really say that it's Blue's fault, but again, he hasn't looked that great. Now, I don't really have much more to say other than going into this game, this is huge. If the Cowboys lose this game, it's 100% certain that they're not making the playoffs barring a miracle. If they win this game, they're kind of on the outside looking in. Hopefully they find a way to get into the playoffs. We'll see. Part of me is like, do you just go for the high draft pick? But again, if you're a fan that completely understood what the expectations were, especially after we traded Micah Parsons, you're like myself, for example. I felt like, okay, you're probably a 9-win football club at best, and you go out there and you win, let's just say 7 to 9 games. Okay, you're kind of where I expected you to be, but that doesn't give you the precursor, or more specifically, doesn't give you the excuse to just be like, is what it is. Like, nah, you got to actually try. Like, you can't, like, this is what's crazy is going into this next year, and we'll talk about this as we move further and further and further closer to 2026, is that you need to actually spend resources on this defense. Like, yes, just re-sign George Pickens. You can find another running back, or if you want to bring back Javonte Williams for another year, that's fine. But you really, 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 really need to hamper down this defense. Okay. So anybody have any final comments, questions, concerns, anything? If so, I'll go ahead and we'll start closing this stuff out. Honestly, this game could go either way. However, Javonte has over 1,000 yards rushing. I would franchise tag him, sign Pickens, and trade Javonte for a second or third round pick in 2026. I don't even think that. See, and I like what you're saying. The thing is that they would not franchise tag Javonte Williams. I think they would franchise tag George Pickens, which I would be okay with. But again, the problem with franchise tagging a player is you lose all negotiation because that's the floor for the contract. The thing is why, with Javonte Williams, I don't think, if it were me, I just think that I would do maybe a 2 to 3 year deal at the max. That's between $8 to $10 million. And you might say, that's insane. Space, that's insane. But that's just how the market is, especially if he rushes for over 1,000 yards, has 10 plus touchdowns. Like, that's going to be his market. And the Cowboys can afford that. I don't really care about, because the thing is that when we talk about like opening a championship window, I've said that the Cowboys are going to be gunning for 2026 and 2027 to be the next window that opens up for them to try and win a championship. But we'll see. But yes, built through the draft. But yes, I'm going to go ahead and log off, guys. I hope you guys had a fantastic day. You have a fantastic day today. I'm trying to think. So tomorrow I'm going to be busy. So I might not do a show immediately after the game is over. I might do it later in the evening. So just stay put for that. But I hope you guys, again, enjoyed this. And I just appreciate all y'all so much. And I hope you have a blessed rest of your day. Okay, guys. Have a good one. Goodbye.